January and February are so cold in the Midwest. It's a perfect time to do some cozy witch crafting. I'm turning this 1980 potpourri crock into a dedicated electric cauldron for simmer pot spells that can include sigil magic on its chalkboarded surface. Coming up next. Welcome to the Witch's Studio. I am, of course, Mickie Mueller, author, illustrator, and witch, not necessarily in that order. And I'm glad to share some heartwarming, magical crafting with you today. If you visited me here in my virtual studio before, then I'm glad to greet you again. If you're visiting for the first time, then welcome. You'll find spells, witchy tips, and tricks here, plus lots of DIYs on my channel. If that's your cup of tea, then you found your way here for a reason. If you haven't yet, you'll thank yourself if you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you can always find your way back to my Witch's Studio. Also, hitting that notification bell is the best way to be among the first to catch my next video as soon as I post it. Simmer pot spells have become pretty popular in recent years. You don't need anything fancy to do these kind of spells. In fact, they're perfect for anyone dipping their toe into magic, new witches, and experienced witches alike. Charged botanicals, water, heat, and your intention. It's so simple. It's witch closet friendly, workable on most budgets, uses easily procured ingredients, and makes your house smell good. What's not to love? When I thought about doing some cozy simmer pot spells, I remembered the hand-me-down potpourri pot I had in the closet collecting dust. The design wasn't really my style and didn't fit in with my decor, so I knew I wanted to paint it black like a cauldron, but I couldn't decide on what design elements to add. Then I realized it would depend on the spell I was doing. I knew I could use my simmer pot for spells to fill my home with different kinds of energy. Love, healing, clearing, prosperity, protection, blessing. Then I landed on an idea. If I covered it with chalkboard paint, I could use chalk to add sigils and intentions for whatever spell I was casting, and I could erase it for the next spell. Come on and I'll show you how I did it. So I grabbed my rival potpourri crock, which is model 3207. It's from the late 80s and early 90s. Potpourri that was mostly dried flowers and dyed wood chips was all the rage, and they would put them in this pot with some water to make your house smell good. I also have my handy roll of painter's tape, some 60 grit sandpaper, and thanks to my friends over on Patreon, I was able to purchase the Rust-Oleum chalkboard paint and the Rust-Oleum primer for this project so I could do it right. But even budget-friendly stuff does have a little cost to it. So thank you to everyone on Patreon for helping with this video. Let's turn this potpourri crock from the 90s into a dedicated simmer pot cauldron that we can add custom sigils to for every spell. There was one spot on the cord that looked a little dodgy, so I went ahead and used some electrical tape to just cover that up. This is a hand-me-down, and it's seen things. Scratching up the surface a little bit with some sandpaper really helps the primer and the paint stick to it. The outside of this is metal, and the paint and primer both said they worked for metal, so I just went to town on it. Then I used a damp sponge to clean all the dust off the outside. Do make sure you wear a mask while you're sanding. These were made in the 80s. Who knows what was in the paint? It was a free-for-all. Nobody cared. And yeah, I accidentally sanded right over the little plastic light. If you're doing a project like this, you could maybe put a little tape over that so you don't scratch yours up. I'm putting it on after because I want to protect that from the paint. I'm just molding that painter's tape right around the shape of it and kind of pushing it in with my fingernails. Then I got the idea to just use a ballpoint pen to kind of trace around the outside of it a whole bunch of times. And it actually just barely cuts through the edge of the tape, making it really easy to cover that nice little round light. It's like magic. Now, unlike slow cookers from the days gone by, the crock in this does not lift out. It's just all one piece. So I'm going to have to mask off the clay crock part that's around the outside of it to make sure that I don't get any spray paint in this crock. You can absolutely use the brush-on kind of chalkboard paint, and then you might not have to go through this step. This is what they had at my store, so it's what I grabbed. But they do make a brush-on one, and I've seen people online use them for slow cookers, and they just brush the paint on with a sponge brush to have pretty decent results. So I'm just working around the edge of this. I'm not worrying at all about going over onto the metal because I'm going to go through and clean it up at the end. It's a much easier way to do this. And that's kind of how it's going so far. I am not about to use up all my tape to fill the inside of that in, and I don't want any overspray getting on the inside. So I'm going to use a little piece of paper just to kind of fill in a lot of the extra. I cut the paper a little bit larger than the actual size of the opening so that I could push it in a little bit and tape it around the outside and make sure that I get it all the way covered. And that will protect the inside of the crock. I also decided to tape over the safety labels on the bottom. They have information about voltage, how much liquid you can use in it, and I just decided I would rather have that information than not, so I'm just taping over those too. Now I grab my little craft knife and I'm going to clean up all the edges along the pot. First, I'm kind of smoothing everything down with my fingernail to make sure that it's nice and tight up against the container. And then I'm just going to start cutting right in the seam where the metal and the crock meet, and continue that all the way around the top. Now it's really easy to just peel that tape right off. It's low tack, so it peels off really easily, leaving a nice crisp edge all along there. It's kind of satisfying. Don't forget the spot where the cord attaches to the pot. You're not going to want to get overspray on any of that either. So I just used some of the little scrappy bits of tape that I peeled off the top and masked off that little section where it attaches. And of course you want to mask the cord as well, so I just started using blue painter's tape. I decided that was going to just use up way too much tape, so I ended up using some paper to put along the edge of it. I should have done the whole cord. I just did part of it because I thought, no way am I going to get overspray on the end part of the cord. Famous last words. This is my favorite part of the video, where I took it outside and showed you the primer and then forgot how my phone works and completely neglected to get the first shots of me actually painting the thing. So, did I just not get that whole thing? Oh my God. That was the actual moment of me realizing. It was cold out, so I brought it inside to dry a little bit faster. And because my impatience has messed up some projects in the past, I decided to take the dog for a walk in between layers of the primer and the chalkboard paint. It made for a better project and a happier dog. Here we are actually painting. It's not as satisfying, of course, as when you first cover up the white with the black paint. But you know what? There you go. You friends all know how spray paint works, and I figure you get the gist of it. 2 coats of primer, 2 coats of chalkboard paint. Plenty of drying time in between. Check the label on your paint. It will give you all the information, and just do your best to follow the instructions. That's what I did, and I was pretty happy with how it turned out. I get excited to get right to the fun part, so I have skipped sanding and primer in the past, but I decided I wanted to do it right this time, and it really paid off. Now I speeded up life because I wanted to get through taking off all of that tape. Yeah, I even waited 24 hours, and that was hard, but I wanted it to be right. I knew that if I peeled the tape off early, then I would end up doing the chalk early, and that might not work, and I don't have another one of these things. Look at that! Love it! Okay, it turned out. And it's got this funny little lid with little holes in it. I guess it's supposed to maybe keep the water from evaporating as quickly. And so I might use that sometimes. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot the coolest, most satisfying part to take off the tape of is that little light. I can't wait to see it all lit up when it's finished. Okay, so a really important part of the instructions, oh my gosh, yes, I read the instructions, is that you have to season the chalkboard by rubbing the side of the chalk all over the surface, covering it, and then cleaning it off, and then you're ready to go. So that is what we're going to do. I've got my chalk. If I'm honest, I was a little nervous about this part. I've never worked with this chalkboard paint, so I don't really know how it's supposed to work. I thought, what if I rub chalk all over this and I've done something wrong and it doesn't come off? And of course, I really wanted that black cauldron look, and yeah, all of the chalk rubbed off and it looks fantastic. So now the moment of truth. I decided just to test it and just draw some sample kind of sigils on it and see how it would look. Oh my gosh, I'm living for this. Did a little pentagram with an evil eye in the middle. I decided to do a couple of triketras on each side. It's a great way to add magical energy to all of the simmer pot spells. This is what I want. And then, you know what? You can also put words on it. I just love how it turned out. And look at this. Then you can wipe off the sigils and you can put new ones for the next spell. Yes, I did end up wrapping that cord in electrical tape because I had a little overspray on it, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. I hope you enjoyed that witchy craft, and maybe it'll inspire you to try something similar. The best kinds of spells to use simmer pots for are positive spells for yourself and anyone living in your home. It fills your home with its energy, so I would recommend only spells for what you want to bring into your home, not what you want to cast away. I'm going to share 3 versions of simmer pot spells in my next video, so if you've never done them and you want to try it, I'll have some inspiration for you. Of course, I'll use my newly revamped simmer pot cauldron for the spells, and I'll include sigils. I'll also show you how to add sigils to simmer pot spells, even if you're doing yours on the stove. Where there's a witch, there's a way. Please feel free to share this with your witch friends. They might have one of these little potpourri cookers laying around that can have a new magical life. Make sure you're subscribed. Don't forget to cast your spell on the notification bell so you won't miss the next video where I put this beauty to some good use. Speaking of new videos, you can now catch my new videos early and ad-free on my Patreon for members of all tiers. I'll put a link in the description below and in my About section. I'm also sharing exclusive content over on Patreon, sneak peeks into current projects with opportunities for your input, behind the scenes stuff, and monthly printables with most of the perks available for all tiers. Like this printable owl, which, you guessed it, is also a spell. If you're interested, the video where I show this owl spell is over on my Patreon. Even if you're not a member, you can go watch the video. And if you're interested in grabbing the download, you certainly can if you just pledge to be a member for even a month. Thanks again for visiting me here. I will see you next time. Until then, I hope that you stay safe, healthy, and happy. And remember, as always, to be your magic.